This is my father's tunic from the First World War, the 52nd Battalion.
That would be the number of years he was in the service. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. So each chevron meant 1 year's active service. Right. So he was in for 4 years.
And this means? That
would have been where his wound stripe was.
Oh.
It was a metal, brass piece of metal that went this length. Okay. That meant he got wounded in action.
Right.
And then again, the collar dogs meant what unit he was with. But what else is interesting is they've got the old leather buttons on it.
Right.
Most of the uniforms had the brass buttons on it with the British coat of arms. Mm-hmm. And if you look at your dad's picture, the uniforms were made with 7 buttons on it. Yeah. So that you could tell that was an original Canadian uniform.
Oh, so why would he have 2 different ones?
He may have been wounded in that one.
The original buttons were the brass buttons, and he didn't like polishing them, and I guess they were allowed to change to leather buttons, and they would have been like this button then, with the crest on it.
But overall, for a uniform being over 100 years old,
right,
it's in very good shape. If your grandkids ever seen the uniform, Granddad, you wore this thing?
And they've all tried it on.
Yes.
And they've all said, you were so small.
Yeah, no, and actually, the majority of the soldiers were probably about your size.
Yeah.
You even look at the shoulders on them.
Exactly, yeah.
Scrawny kids from Canada.
Yeah.
And that's why the uniforms were so small.
Right, yeah. There was an article in the newspaper about someone in the States who wanted to get some information on the First World War. I received the questionnaire, and I sat with my dad and asked him a bunch of questions, and it was very interesting talking to him because I had never heard my dad talk about the war at all. I guess a lot of people didn't want to talk about it, you know, and my mother was so surprised too. She listened into the whole conversation, and she said she had never heard him speak about the war at all either, you know.
This is the whole battalion.
Right.
A, B, C, and if there's D company.
He might even be in there.
Well, he was probably in that one because that was taken in, 1915.
They all had their picture taken before they went overseas, just in case something happened while they were there and they were not able to come back. And that's why I still have my dad's picture. Yeah. And he, one of the questions, was it all as you expected it to be? And nobody expected the war to be as bad as it was.
Well, they expected the war to end by Christmas.
Oh, I know.
And then basically 3.5 years later, it finally ended.
There were a lot of rats in the trenches. They'd put cheese on their bayonets, and when the rats came along, they'd blast them. And the only Germans he saw were 4 that had been captured by a patrol in no man's land. The question was, did you ever take part in a major assault? Only the 3rd Battalion of Utes, when they had to help the
Canadian Mounted Rifles.
Okay, who were chased back by the Germans. They had no rifles ready. The whole battalion was scattered. My dad went next to a hedge filled with water and had to stay there because it was daylight. Sergeant Head and Corporal Williams were killed in the spot he was going to go in. When my dad was wounded, the wrong order was given. They were told to start at 6 p.m., but it was still light out. September 1916. The order should have been later, after dark. They knew it was part of an assault, but not such a big one. Oh, yeah, this is it. The Germans built a road called the Sunken Roads. Half of the battalion was wounded at 7 p.m., and lay in a shell hole until midnight. They had cigarettes with them, and they decided to smoke them all, just in case.
Well, you might as well.
Men went past him. His only thought was of getting out, not if, but when. And he had no fear of being left there. He was carried in a sheet by 4 men, one carrying a white flag, to the closest dugout. And the next morning he was taken to a field hospital and then sent to England, to Oxford University. They were fighting for Canada, but also for their own survival. If he had to do it all over again, he probably would have. it does bring back memories. I even remember where we were sitting. Yeah. I was shocked by a lot that he did say. You know, it's pretty emotional.